Good morning, distinguished guests, respected faculty members, esteemed speakers, and dear students. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this inaugural session of the Second National Convention on Women in India and the inaugural edition of Jindal Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival being celebrated from the 8th to the 10th of March at OP Jindal Global University. The Second National Convention on Women in India builds upon the success of the first convention held in the year 2025 and continues its commitment to fostering rigorous, inclusive, action-oriented conversations on gender justice. The inaugural Jindal Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival seeks to broaden and deepen this engagement by bringing feminist visions in dialogue with literature, art, cinema, and other cultural expressions. It is now my privilege to invite the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University, Professor C. Raj Kumar, to deliver the welcome remarks.
A very, very good morning to all of you. I must at the outset say that rarely we are in panels, not necessarily in India, but around the world, where there is one sole marginal representation of a man with all outstanding women duly represented here. So let's give a round of applause for that idea itself, because far too many conferences and panels end up having far too many men. So before I talk anything substantive today, I want to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guest of honor, Ms. Bhumi Satish Pednekkar, who is an actor, an entrepreneur, an UN advocate, a climate warrior, most importantly, one of the most thoughtful and inspiring voices in the world of cinema. In many ways, she has inspired generations of young people to look at some of the most compelling issues facing humanity. So we are deeply grateful to her for her presence, for her participation. She came all the way from Mumbai, despite several of our commitments to be with us today. So I'm deeply grateful to her for being present here. I also want to extend a warm welcome to Madam High Commissioner, Ms. Mahishini Colonne. She'll tell about her name a bit. She, of course, had done her education in India. I hope she'll talk a little bit about it. She's the Distinguished High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to India, somebody who has been playing the role of an outstanding diplomat at a time when diplomacy has been unfortunately undermined. Even international law and international institutions have been undermined. It is the voices of reason, such as the one that we have here today, will help humanity in many ways safeguard our principles and values. So I'm grateful to Madam Colonne for her presence. I also want to extend a warm welcome to all our distinguished faculty members, students, and staff for the second international convention that we are having here on women. But we're also adding another component to this convention, which is about the Literary Art and Literature Festival. So I want to thank my colleagues Upasana, Mahanta, Nisha, Nair, as well as Gargi for putting together this huge effort, which we will be unraveling today. I also want to thank all of you who are present here, because I know we are competing with the India-New Zealand finals as well. And so we lost a few on the way, but we are still here, and we are determined to do this as we are beginning the journey of the next 3 days. I intend to share a bit of perspectives about the issue, but before I do that, because the nature of the issue that we're going to discuss is very serious, I want to start with how many of you are familiar with this British satirical, serial called The Yes Prime Minister? All right. I would like to assume many of you know it. So I'm going to share the scene. This is a scene where the Prime Minister of UK, Jim Hacker, is being invited to speak at this national convention. And so the scene is they are preparing, along with the Cabinet Secretary to the UK, as well as the Principal Private Secretary to the Prime Minister. And the three men, are preparing for this convention. So this is the scene. The setting is the office of the UK Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has just received an invitation to speak at the second National Convention on Women in India, organized by OP Jindal Global University. Present in the room are the Prime Minister, Sir Humphrey Appleby, and his earnest assistant Bernard Woolley. The Prime Minister says, Humphrey, I have received an invitation to speak at the second National Convention on Women in India. Apparently, it's happening on International Women's Day. Sir Humphrey, splendid Prime Minister, an extremely important occasion. Prime Minister, indeed, but I must ask a rather delicate question. Sir Humphrey, Prime Minister. And then Prime Minister says, why are three men sitting in this room preparing a speech about women? Bernard replies, well, Prime Minister, technically we are supporting women's empowerment. Prime Minister, Bernard, it does feel slightly ironic. Sir Humphrey, not ironic at all. Governments have always been extremely supportive of women's advancement. Prime Minister, really? Sir Humphrey, absolutely. We have been studying it, reviewing it, debating it, and issuing policy papers on it for decades. Bernard, but Sir Humphrey, shouldn't women themselves lead these discussions? Sir Humphrey, Bernard, they do lead them. Prime Minister, how? Sir Humphrey, they lead the conferences, the movements, the research, and increasingly the governments. We merely facilitate the paperwork. Prime Minister, Humphrey, the invitation says this convention is being organized in India to mark International Women's Day. Bernard, and it is hosted by OP Jindal Global University, Prime Minister, scholars, activists, writers, policymakers, all gathering to discuss women's leadership. The Prime Minister responds, that sounds impressive, Sir Humphrey. Indeed, India is a nation where the scale of democratic conversation is quite extraordinary. Prime Minister, so what exactly should I say in my speech? Sir Humphrey, Prime Minister, the key message is very simple. And Prime Minister, and that is, Sir Humphrey, that empowering women is not merely a social aspiration. It's an economic necessity, a democratic imperative, and occasionally a political survival strategy. Bernard, political survival? Sir Humphrey, Bernard, women constitute half the electorate. Ignoring them would be administratively unwise. The Prime Minister responds, Humphrey, I think the real point is that conversations like this convention matter because they move the debate forward. Bernard, yes, Prime Minister, from discussion to action. Sir Humphrey, quite right. Although, Prime Minister, if I may say, the real progress of the 21st century may be that three men are finally beginning to realize that they should spend more time listening and less time explaining. I want to start this to bring home the larger point of what we are trying to do through this convention, because of the fact that there is more to these conversations than the convention itself. So I want to quickly say that it's an absolute delight and a pleasure for us here at OP Jindal Global University to celebrate 8th March, which began in the early 20th century as part of the global struggles for women's dignity, labor rights, and political participation, to mark a day that will effectively recognize and celebrate this occasion. It reminds us that progress in women's rights has never been accidental. It has always been the result of collective struggles, courageous leadership, and enlightened institutions. Today we gather here not merely to celebrate achievements, but to reflect on how societies, constitutions, and institutions must continue advancing equality. India's journey in this regard is particularly significant. At the moment of independence, our founders chose a bold path to build a republic rooted in equality, dignity, and universal citizenship. So let me quickly outline 5 historical milestones in India's advancements of women's rights. First, early social reform movements. Before independence, the foundation for women's rights in India were led by reformers and women leaders. Reformers such as Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, challenged oppressive customs such as sati and child marriage. Women leaders including Sarojini Naidu and Annie Besant mobilized women in the freedom movement. Those struggles transformed the question of women's rights from a social reform issue into a national democratic aspiration. The second milestone is about universal adult franchise in India. One of the most revolutionary decisions in modern democracies came with the adoption of the Constitution of India in 1950. India granted universal adult franchise to every citizen regardless of gender, caste, religion, or property, even education. This was extraordinary for its time. Around 80 million women were eligible to vote at the first general election. Women constituted almost half of the electorate. Many established democracies were far behind. Women received voting rights in Switzerland only in 1971. Several countries restricted voting rights for minorities or property holders well into a mid-20th century. India, a newly independent nation, chose equality from day one. The third milestone is about constitutional guarantees of equality. The Constitution created a powerful framework for gender equality, including provisions in Article 14, 15, 16, and even 39D, which talks about equal pay for equal work. These provisions ensured that women's rights were not just acts of charity, but were constitutional guarantees. The fourth milestone was about grassroots political representation. A transformative step came in the form of the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments. These were the amendments on Panchayati Raj institutions and Nagarpalikas. These amendments mandated one-third reservation for women in panchayats and municipalities, resulting in over 1 million elected women representatives across India. This has created one of the largest experiments in grassroots democracy in the world. And the fifth milestone is about women's representation in national politics. The passage of the 160th Amendment of the Constitution of India, Women's Reservation Law, marks another milestone, reserving 33% of seats in parliament and state legislatures for women. Yet, the numbers remind us how much further we must go. Women currently hold about 14 to 15% of seats in the Lok Sabha. Progress is visible, but we have a long way to go. So let me quickly identify the 5 key challenges for the future. Challenge 1, safety and dignity. Women must feel safe at home, in public places, and at workplaces. Despite laws, violence and harassment remain a serious concern. True empowerment means creating a society where women can live without fear. Challenge number 2, equal pay for equal work. The principle of equal pay for equal work is constitutionally recognized, yet the reality remains different. Recent labor data shows women earn about 16,500 rupees per month in regular jobs, compared with 22,100 rupees for men. This represents roughly a 25% gender pay gap. It could be actually more in some industries and professions. Recognizing women's work is not merely an economic issue, it is a matter of justice and dignity. Challenge 3, representation in leadership and institutions. Women remain underrepresented in positions of power and responsibility. For example, women make up less than 15% of India's parliament, which I mentioned, but similar disparities exist across professions, including judiciary, corporate leadership, academia, and public administration. Jindal Global University remains an exception and an outlier, with more than 55% of our faculty members being women, more than 55% of leadership positions, both in academics and in administrative positions, being held by women, but we remain an outlier, not just in India, but around the world. So representation matters because institutions become stronger when they reflect the diversity of the society. Challenge 4, recognizing the care economy. One of the most invisible contributions of women is unpaid care work. Data shows women spend about 352 minutes daily on domestic work, compared with 52 minutes for men. The economic value of unpaid care work is estimated to be 15 to 17% of India's GDP. This contribution sustains families, economies, and societies, and yet it often goes unrecognized. Challenge number 5, institutional support for working mothers. Women's careers are often interrupted by childbearing and caregiving responsibilities. Societies must create ecosystems including maternity and parental leave, childcare infrastructure, flexible working arrangements, and workplace equality policies. Empowerment does not mean forcing women to choose between family and career. It means creating systems that allow them to pursue both with dignity and justice. So my final message is, equality is not a favor. When we talk about these reforms, we are not asking society to favor women. We are asking institutions to recognize reality. Women contribute to society as citizens, as professionals, as leaders, as caregivers. Advancing women's rights is therefore not a radical agenda. It is simply the fulfillment of the values that inspired the Constitution of India: equality, dignity, and justice for all. A society that empowers women does not weaken tradition, it strengthens democracy. When women rise, institutions become fairer, economies become stronger, and societies become more humane. Let us therefore move forward with our conviction that advancing women's rights is not merely a policy goal, it is our constitutional responsibility and our collective future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Raj Kumar, for the inspiring, the most creative and thoughtful welcome address. It is my pleasure to invite Professor Upasana Mahanta, professor at the Jindal Global Law School and the Dean of the Office of Admissions and Outreach at OP Jindal Global University, to present the introductory remarks on the Second National Convention on Women in India.
Thank you, and a very good morning to all of you. Her Excellency, Mahishini Colonne, acclaimed actor, Bhumi Pednekkar, my colleagues on the dais, our founding Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. C. Raj Kumar, my colleagues in the audience, students and guests from all over India and some outside. It is my absolute honor, privilege, and a pleasure to welcome you to the second National Convention on Women in India and the inaugural Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival. I cannot believe that this moment has come because last few days has been only about logistics. It has only been about transport and venue and background images. So, you know, when Professor Raj was talking, actually, we finally got, and I can perhaps speak on behalf of my colleagues as well, to sit back and reflect on what this moment means. And before I talk about the National Convention, the second convention, we did the first one in 2025, I want to reflect briefly on what Professor Raj just said. And I was thinking about it when he was speaking about these 5 key moments that he highlighted about which sort of shaped the conversation and the history and the present moments of women in India. And my reflections on these 5 key moments perhaps will help us, and not perhaps the experts and the colleagues who are present here, but perhaps the large number of students who are present here, to think about and understand that the women's question, and for that matter, the gender question, is not a homogeneous, monolithic question. It is a question that is deeply interspersed with questions of caste, questions of sexuality, questions of religion, and so many other social categories and sites of oppression. So the first thing Professor Raj talked about, and a moment to recognize, and an important moment to recognize, is the social reform movement. A movement that was led by men. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, largely led by men, known as the first women's movement in India. And of course, there was a whole generation of women who emerged. And then there is a tradition of Bhakti movement and otherwise. But the social reform movement, and the way we sort of read about it in our school textbooks, and our students will understand. We talked about it as a movement that talked about, abolishing sati, that talked about abolishing child marriage, that talked about deciding on the correct age for women to get married. I do not have the time to get into the details, but we also know that over a period of time, many of these discussions, for example, the age of consent debate has always has been about age and never about consent. So you have to complicate and understand the nuances about how we understand movements and complexities that are associated with movements. Professor Raj spoke about Sarojini Naidu. Sarojini Naidu very famously said in one of her speeches, "I am not a feminist." And why did she say that? Not because she did not believe in women's equality and empowerment. She said that because she wanted to disassociate herself with the kind of feminism that was happening in the West. We wanted to say that we are not like British women. We are not like our colonizers who oppress women. We are equal to our men. Professor Raj spoke about a second very important moment, the universal adult franchise. When you look at the Constituent Assembly debate, we have an exhibition, I will talk about it briefly, at our Constitution Museum and the Rights and Freedom Academy on the lives of any masculine. But universal adult franchise came to us, and it was a very, very important moment. But all the 15 members of the Constituent Assembly, and Dr. Chetan can correct me if I'm wrong, was opposed to the idea of any special treatment to women. They believed that the Indian state will give equality to everybody. But as Professor Raj said, equality is not a favor, but equality is also a very, very treacherous concept. Who are we equal to? whom do I want to become an equal to? Do a upper caste woman, and if she wants to become equal to a man, would she want to become equal to a Dalit men? Because the Dalit men have their own frameworks of oppressions. So therefore, the idea of equality itself needs to be problematized and understood. The idea of choice itself needs to be problematized and understood. And you look at the movements, how they develop. You have a constituent assembly. You have 15 women members who say that the women's question is a question of democracy itself. And then you have a moment they say, we do not want special treatment for women. We do not want special reservation. And then you have Panchayati Raj, another moment that Professor Raj recognized. The Panchayati Raj and municipal governance, 33% reservation of women, saw 1 million women coming into grassroots organizations as decision maker in Panchayati Raj. And then there is another conversation that happens, that they are sarpanch patis, that who will now make the chapatis, that women are mere rubber stamps, who are just, giving stamps to the decisions that men are taking. Can we look at creation of structures and mechanisms that truly empower women to take decisions, so it further complicates the matter. 1970, we had the Committee for the Status of Women in India. 1974, they submit the Toward Equality report. They still reject special treatment to women. They still reject reservation, but they say that women in India are becoming a minority. Minority not in terms of number, but minority in political, social, and economic life. And the same set of women who refused special reservation are now demanding some kind of special treatments and affirmative action for women. Veena Mazumdar says the idea of abstract citizenship does not work anymore. So how do we understand the idea of grassroots political participations, panchayat, municipal governance, the 33% reservation bill in the parliament, and women's participation in national politics? In the midst of this, a lot of other things are happening. Of course, I don't want to make it into a lecture, but please bear with me for 2 minutes. Post-independence, Raj Kumar says that there is no common enemy to fight against. So women's movement sort of does not have the kind of depth it had during the national movement. 1950s, you see women participating in the grassroots movement, in labor movements, in peasant movements. Women participate in large numbers. From anti-price rise to anti-dowry in the 1970s, between Mathura and Nirbhaya, between the pride parades and the Naga Mothers movement, between Iram Sharmila's quiet resilience to the mothers in Kashmir. The question of the women's movement is a deeply complicated, complex, and nuanced one. In the 1980s, autonomous Dalit women's movements arise. Gopal Guru says Dalit women speaks differently. Sharmila Rage talks about masculinization of the Dalit women, Dalit movement, and the sovereignization of the women's movement. Right? And in between all of this, we are trying to create solidarities across differences. It is sometimes possible to get lost in these conversations. We have a conversation today with Professor Mary John and Ms. Jennifer Liang on feminist legacies, the tale and its telling. And what is the tale? And how do we say it? This and many more has been the inspiration behind wanting to do and mark this moment of International Women's Day and to do the first and now the second National Convention on Women in India. That is, institutions like ours who want to think intentionally. I feel it is our responsibility to create spaces where such dialogue is possible. Therefore, some of our like-minded colleagues, including the Vice Chancellor, all of us came together and we decided to host the first National Convention on Women in India in 2025. The idea was to create a space where we could have open, meaningful, transparent conversation, bring in different perspectives, experiences, and where different forms of knowledge could meet. We are very much aware that we are not the first institution to think of doing something for International Women's Day, to think of doing a conference or a convention. But we want to make sure that we do it in a way where we are able to bring multiple voices across differences together and have spaces for dialogue. Over the next 3 days in the convention and the festival, you will see that we will host more than 40 sessions bringing together participants from across the country and belong. And we have author salons, we have student corners, we have conversations, we have a conversation with Ms. Bhumi after that, but we have multiple conversations, authors' conversations. We have hosting a special exhibition celebrating the legacy of Annie Mascarenhas, a member of the Constituent Assembly, freedom fighter, lawyer, activist, and the first member of parliament from Kerala. The exhibition brings together her letters and diaries, her photographs and speeches, and books associated with her life. What we are trying to do through these moments that we're trying to capture and create is celebrate the women, remember the women who helped shape the Republic, but also encourage us to think continuously and critically about the future that we want to build. That is the thought behind the first and the second National Convention on Women in India, and we are so delighted that so many of you are joining us here today for this conversation. Before I end, I want to say, and I started with this, so I want to end with it, that organizing an event of this scale, and those of you who have organized, you know is not an easy task. Behind every session, every discussion, every planning, coordination, it's a mammoth task, and there are so many people who have come together to make this possible. This convention would not have been possible if colleagues did not come together and offered support, curated panels, got in touch with speakers, gave us quiet courage, asked us if we need cups of coffee in the middle of the night, and was there. And I feel that those moments of solidarities that are forged in formal contexts like this, but also the moments of solidarities that are forged in such informal spaces when people come together to create something meaningful, is the true spirit of the convention that we are trying to do here today. There are a lot of people to thank, but I don't want to make it into a vote of thanks speech. We will come to that later. I want to thank you all once again for joining us for the first National Convention, now for the second National Convention, and the inaugural Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. I look forward to interacting with all of you during the course of the next 3 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Upasana, for your insightful remarks and for highlighting the vision behind this important initiative. I now invite Professor Gargi Bharadwaj, Associate Professor at the Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities and the Director of the Office of Student Life and Cultural Engagement, to present the introductory remarks on the inaugural Jindal Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival.
Dignitaries on the stage, friends and colleagues in the audience, and students. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'm most delighted to welcome you to the inaugural Jindal Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival 2026. The culture of physical gathering is part of human civilization's history. We have always come together in markets, in town squares, inside and outside places of worship, and on the streets, not only for economic exchange, but also for laying the foundations of our civic life, for knowledge transfer, and for building a sense of belonging that transcends our individual, familial, or community identity. Poetry, performance, art, and public discourse have always been and continue to be an integral part of human assembly. These occasions of coming together are moments that suspend the everyday and create a temporary state of exceptionality, moments that either reaffirm community values or otherwise question and transform them. But these occasions are also time and energy. And as my friend and colleague Upasana said, they are logistics, they are budgets, they are endless emails that leave us exhausted, at a loss temporarily for why these occasions exist and why they matter. Today, technology has connected us in ways that were unimaginable even a generation ago. And yet, intense digital polish and decreased positive social affect, the time we devote to others in person has shrunk, almost without our noticing. An arts festival interrupts that trend. It reclaims time and space for presence. It is a stage set for spontaneous encounter, for face-to-face conversation, for unpredictable collision of people and ideas. Designed as an interdisciplinary festival, this edition seeks to celebrate creativity, critical thinking, and plurality, while meaningfully engaging students and all of us in an immersive and reflective universe of words, images, and ideas. Interdisciplinarity in the arts, as we all know, is a methodology of imagination. It is the bridge between a painter's stroke and a poet's rhythm, between the digital code and the physical stage. The Jindal Interdisciplinary Arts and Literature Festival is envisioned as a flagship cultural academic initiative that reimagines the role of literature in the arts within a university space. Conceived as an integrated initiative, anchored in collaboration with the second edition of the National Convention on Women in India, this edition places women's lives, gender justice, voice, visibility, and power at the center of cultural imagination. Over the course of the 3 days, we will witness how women mobilize collaboration, compassion, and care in writing and reading, storytelling, art making, and performance to produce counter-narratives to patriarchal worldviews and concepts of artistic genius, instead enabling a sustained dialogue between scholarship, creative practice, and lived experience. On a confessional note, it does feel like a luxury to organize a festival while the world feels on fire. We often found ourselves asking, why invest in literature, music, dialogue at such a time? I offer no definite answers. We found no definite answers, but only the faith in our shared humanity and our capacity to imagine and connect. Coming together for a festival of arts and literature, we think, is a gesture of trust, a vote of confidence in the idea that conversation still matters, that culture is worth protecting, and that community is always possible. As the German theater director, playwright, and thinker Bertolt Brecht famously said, "In the dark times, will there also be singing?" Yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Professor Gargi, for your profound remarks and for emphasizing the significance of cultural and intellectual engagement within the academic environment. We will now screen a film celebrating women of rural India through the lens of Haryana, women who strive, who sustain and flourish, overcoming challenges on a day-to-day basis by moving beyond the walls and embracing. Okay, so we will screen this film later today. With that, we would move to the inaugural address. It is a great honor for me and for all of us to welcome a distinguished personality whose work spans cinema, entrepreneurship, and advocacy for climate and social justice. Please join me in welcoming and inviting Ms. Bhumi Satish Pednekkar, an acclaimed actor, entrepreneur, United Nations advocate, and climate activist to deliver the inaugural address.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for making time on a Sunday. I'm thanking you because the fact that all of you all are here today, participating on this very, very important day gives me so much hope. I want to stand here and thank every individual in history that has made space for a woman like me, for individuals like all of us in this room. I'm extremely thrilled because I don't know how many of you know this, but my sister has passed out of this beautiful university the last time. Yes, I'm getting to that. I'm going to be doing a lot of talking after this. I'm going to keep this rather short. Honestly, it's such an honor for me to be here. The last time I was here was for your festival, Biswa Meal. I wasn't here as a speaker. I was here as my sister Samiksha's companion, celebrating what everything OP Jindal Global University has to offer. I really, really want to congratulate everybody on the stage, everybody here, on the convention and the festival. I think it's so important for conversations like so to continue. I don't think any of us can stop. I've had a very unique journey being an actor. I'll obviously speak about it in our session, but again, thank you so much. I'm very thrilled to be a part of this incredible day, and thank you for your participation, and thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Ms. Pednekkar, for that heartfelt address. We now move on to the keynote address, which is an important aspect of today's inaugural session. It is my distinct honor to welcome Her Excellency, Ms. Mahishini Colonne, the High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to India. Your Excellency has played an important role in strengthening diplomatic relations and fostering cooperation between our two nations. We are deeply honored by your presence. May I respectfully invite you to deliver the keynote address.
Professor Raj Kumar, Vice Chancellor of the O.P. Jindal Global University, distinguished faculty and guests, students of this extraordinary university, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, namaskar, and as they say in my country, ayubowan, which means may you live long. International Women's Day often becomes a moment for celebration, but it is also something else and so much more. To me, International Women's Day is a reminder of the distance between where women are today and where they have always had the right to be. I'm deeply honored to have been invited to speak here today. Until late last evening, the presence of our foreign minister in Delhi for the Raisina dialogue kept me on my feet. And it was during the early hours of this morning that I finally began thinking about what I would say here today. And as I read the letter addressed to me by Professor Raj Kumar, I was struck by the theme, give to gain, because that has a great deal of relevance to my own country, Sri Lanka, not as a slogan, but as a structural truth. And I believe that our story holds something genuinely useful for this conversation, something a little unexpected perhaps, but also honest. In 1960, 66 years ago, a woman stood before the people of Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, elected by the people as the first female prime minister in the history of the world, Sirimavo Bandaranaike. Interestingly, she served for more than 18 years across 3 terms. In 1994, the people of Sri Lanka elected her daughter, Chandrika Kumaratunga, first as prime minister and then as executive president, Sri Lanka's first and to date only female executive president. She was also the youngest person elected to that office so far, at 49 years of age. She received one of the largest percentage mandates in presidential elections in my country, over 62% of the vote. And for a period, mother and daughter held the 2 highest offices in the country simultaneously, prime minister and president, both women. Fast forward to the present. In November 2024, the people of Sri Lanka voted for Dr. Harini Amarasurya. She received the highest preferential votes ever recorded in the Colombo district. An interesting fact about her is that she's not from a dynasty, not from a political family. She's an academic, a sociologist, a trade unionist, a woman who spent her career fighting for the rights of the marginalized. Following the parliamentary election in November 2024, she was appointed as Prime Minister by President Anurakumara Dissanayake under our executive presidential system. Many of you may know that she completed her undergraduate degree right here in India at Hindu College at the University of Delhi. By any measure, Sri Lanka should be a model for women's political leadership. However, we rank 122nd out of 146 countries on the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report. Sri Lanka scores highly in education and health, but faces challenges in women's economic participation and political representation. Women outperform men in many areas of education, yet barely 31% are in the labor force. Bridging this gap is not only a question of equality, it is also a question of unlocking the full economic potential of our societies. Until 2024, only 5% of our parliamentarians were women. And this is in the country that gave the world its first female prime minister. Professor Raj Kumar spoke of the introduction of universal adult franchise. In Sri Lanka, we introduced universal adult franchise even before independence, way back in 1931. And because of that fact, Sri Lanka is acclaimed as Asia's oldest democracy. So how does one reconcile this? The answer, I believe, lies in something deeper than politics. Across South Asia, and this means in Sri Lanka and in India, we have always known how to honor the feminine, and that is in the divine. We pray to Durga, the warrior goddess, fierce and invincible. We invoke Saraswati for wisdom, Lakshmi for prosperity. In Sri Lanka, the goddess Patini, the embodiment of chastity, healing, and justice, has been venerated for more than 2,000 years across Buddhist, Hindu, and folk traditions. She is offered the deepest reverence. She is asked to protect the nation, the harvest, the family. We build temples, we compose devotional poetry, we dress the goddess in silk and gold, and place her at the very center of our spiritual lives. But we do not always treat real women with the same reverence. This is not a comfortable observation, but it is an honest one. This is a critique articulated powerfully by feminist thinkers in this country and mine, that deification itself can be a trap, that placing women on a divine pedestal as goddess, as mother, as the embodiment of honor and purity is not the same as granting women dignity. It can, in fact, be used to control them, because when women are idealized, they are also expected to remain within the narrow roles that idealization creates. The woman on a pedestal has very far to fall. And the moment she steps outside the role assigned to her, the reverence can curdle into something else entirely. And we see this in politics too. Sirimava Bandaranaike was called a weeping widow by her opponents, as though grief were her only credential. The moment a woman is powerful, the culture reaches for ways to diminish her, attributing her success to dynasty, to sympathy, or to the men behind her. The goddess is worshipped, the woman is questioned. And that contradiction is not abstract. It plays out very clearly in our politics. Sirimava Bandaranaike came to power in the wake of her husband's assassination. Her party asked her, somewhat reluctantly, to lead. Many said she rode a wave of sympathy. Her opponents joked that she was the only man in her cabinet. Yet, she served across 3 terms, made Sri Lanka a republic, led the non-aligned movement, and navigated a coup attempt. As Prime Minister, she also held the portfolios of Defense and Foreign Affairs. It was under her watch that the Indo-Lanka Maritime Boundary Agreement was finalized in 1974, and the Sirimavo-Shastri Pact was reached, addressing the long-standing issue of stateless plantation workers of Indian origin in Sri Lanka. She played an important role in resolving key bilateral issues and strengthening India-Sri Lanka relations. Whatever one thinks of her politics or policies, no honest reading of the record can say that she lacked the capacity to govern. On a personal note, I'm reminded every single day of the foresight of Madam Sirimavo Bandaranaike when I look around our chancery and residence on Kautilya Marg here in Chanakyapuri, in the heart of New Delhi's diplomatic enclave. During her first visit to India as Prime Minister in 1960, she laid the foundation stone for the premises that we still use today. More than 6 decades later, we continue to benefit from the facilities she created in Delhi, spaces that remain functional, beautiful, and dignified, enabling us to carry out our diplomatic work in what is arguably Sri Lanka's most important bilateral relationship. India today is Sri Lanka's largest trading partner, largest source of tourists to our country, and a significant investor. In addition, of course, to the deep civilizational and cultural ties that bind our people. The enduring utility and elegance of our premises, to me, remain a quiet testament to Sirimavo Bandaranaike's foresight and to her appreciation of the importance of Sri Lanka's relationship with India. Chandrika Kumaratunga, her daughter, did not inherit the presidency. She won it with a historic and overwhelming majority. She governed through an assassination attempt, and she ended her presidency under the provisions of a constitution that required it, not because she was removed. And Harini Amarasuriya, no dynasty, no sympathy vote, appointed by the President of the Republic on merit under an executive system that places that choice entirely with the head of state following the September 2024 presidential election, and then returned to Parliament by the voters of Colombo with more preferential votes than any candidate had ever received from that district. So she did not get there through preferential treatment. She got there because she earned the trust of a president and of the public. In November 2024, Sri Lanka elected 21 women directly to Parliament, the highest number in our history, more than double the previous figure. Not because of a quota, because voters faced with a broken system chose differently. So what Sri Lanka's women have asked for, and what I believe women everywhere are asking for, is not preferential treatment. It is the removal of the barriers that make the playing field unequal in the first place. Equal access to education, safety in public spaces, affordable childcare, labor laws that do not exclude women under the guise of protecting them, the freedom to compete on merit and without a handicap imposed by circumstance of birth. Opportunity, not charity, not a lower bar, a level playing field. Give to gain, I want to return to this theme one last time. Yes, When societies invest in women's education, safety, and agency, they gain. Sri Lanka cannot service its debt, rebuild its public service, or honor its social contract without the full economic participation of its women. When more than 60% of our university graduates are women and fewer than a third are in the formal economy, that is not a social problem. It is an economic emergency. But for far too long, the bargain has run in only one direction. Women have been the ones doing the giving up careers, giving up mobility, giving up ambition, and the world has called this sacrifice, or tradition, or simply the way things are. What Sri Lanka's women have shown through Sirimavo Bandaranaike's 3 terms, through Chandrika Bandaranaike's presidency, through Dr. Harini Amarasuriya's quiet revolution from the university lecture hall to the Prime Minister's office, is that when the door is genuinely open, women do not merely participate, they lead, they rebuild, they change the terms of the conversation. The goddess Patini in our tradition does not ask permission to heal. She does not wait to be invited. She simply does what she came to do. And I suspect this is not unique to Sri Lanka. Across South Asia, including here in India, women have carried economies, communities, and families through moments of crisis. From conflict to climate disasters, from economic hardship to migration, women have often been the quiet, stabilizing force holding societies together. Yet, when the moment comes to design policy, allocate resources, or sit at the decision-making table, their presence is still far too limited. So to the students in this room, you are the most educated, most connected generation in the history of both our countries. You are not asking for permission, and you are right not to. The work ahead of you is to build institutions worthy of the talent that is already there, waiting, ready, able. Worship goddesses, but do not do so while neglecting real women and while ignoring the women standing beside you. Start trusting the women who are right in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your insightful and deeply nuanced keynote address, tracing the histories of women who built Sri Lanka with the stories and narratives and truth that move beyond boundaries. I now request our founding Vice Chancellor, Professor C. Raj Kumar, and my dear colleagues on the dais to facilitate our guests of honor, Her Excellency, Ms. Mahishini Colonne and Ms. Bhumi Satish Pednekkar. We will now move on to the screening of the film. To give you a brief about the film, it is a film that celebrates the women of rural India through the lens of Haryana, women who strive, who sustain and flourish, overcoming challenges on a day-to-day basis by moving beyond the 4 walls and embracing the world outside with strength and resilience, doing their bit for themselves, for their family, community, and society at large. Here are their stories.
In rural communities, Women rise before dawn and rest long after dusk. They nurture families, sustain households, and quietly power local economies. Yet, their labor, so essential, so constant, often goes unseen and unrewarded. Working women in rural India face a complex web of economic hardship, social barriers, and structural inequality. They carry the heavy burden of unpaid care work, raising children, cooking, cleaning, tending to the elderly, while navigating restricted mobility, limited decision-making power, and financial dependence. Their time is stretched thin. Their ambitions are often deferred. Their voices are too often unheard. And yet, despite it all, they dream. They dream of stability, they dream of dignity, they dream of opportunity, not only for themselves, but for their children. At OP Jindal Global University, we witness every day how meaningful employment can transform lives. By creating safe, respectful, and enabling work environments for women from surrounding rural communities, the university is not simply providing jobs, it is restoring agency. When a woman earns her own income, something profound shifts. Her posture changes, her voice strengthens, her confidence grows. Economic participation becomes personal transformation.
मेरे हस्बैंड की तबीयत सर बहुत ख़राब रहती थी और सबसे अच्छा मेरे को इस सोडेक्सो में जुड़ने के बाद उनकी इलाज में हेल्प मिली और मैं अपने परिवार को भी संभाल पाई।
पहले इतना हमारे घर पे ऐसा कुछ नहीं था, लेकिन यहाँ आने के बाद अपने बच्चों का मैंने कोर्स भी करवाया है और जी उनकी बेटी की शादी भी की है और जी हमारा घर मकान बहुत अच्छे से है। लेकिन अब हमारे हस्बैंड पहले थे, अब एक्सपायर हो चुके, लेकिन मैं अपनी हिम्मत से अपने घर को खूब अच्छी तरह यहाँ आने से अपना गुजारा अच्छे तरह से कर रही हूँ।
मुझे यहाँ आने के बाद बहुत सुविधा, बहुत अच्छा लगा। बच्चों को भी नॉलेज आई बोलने की और घर में भी तो तरीके अच्छे से हम रखते हैं, बहुत अच्छे से। मेरे हस्बैंड भी पहले ऐसे थे, अब वो अच्छे से तरीके से बात करते हैं। थैंक यू।
पहले तो ऐसा था जी, घर से बाहर निकलने में भी डर लगता था, किसी से बात करते हुए भी मन में थोड़ा सा ऐसा होता था कि इससे कैसे बात की जाती है। तो यहाँ आने के बाद में बहुत चीज़ें हैं जो मेरे ज़िंदगी में बदलाव हुई है। बच्चों को अच्छी पढ़ाई मिल रही है, अच्छी कपड़े मिल रहे हैं, अच्छी हर एक चीज़ मिल रही है। जब जहाँ तक है यूनिवर्सिटी से मुझे बहुत कुछ मिला है।
और पहले मेरे घर की कंडीशन बहुत ख़राब थी, लेकिन यहाँ पे यूनिवर्सिटी में आके मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा और मैंने अपने घर का सुधार भी किया और हस्बैंड भी काम करने लगे, बच्चे अच्छे स्कूल में पढ़ने लगे। मुझे यहाँ पे काम करके बहुत अच्छा लगता है।
मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है स्टूडेंट से, स्टाफ से मिलना, मुझे बात करना बहुत अच्छा लगता है सर। मैं बीच बीच में बोल देती हूँ मैडमों को भी, जो मुझे अच्छा लगता है सर।
यहाँ पे आने के बाद मेरे को काफ़ी अपने घर में हेल्प करने का मौका मिला है। मेरे हस्बैंड है, मेरी 3 बेटियाँ हैं, तो वो अकेले ही करते थे जो करते थे, लेकिन अभी यहाँ जो मैं काम कर रही हूँ तो मुझे भी उनकी हेल्प का, अपने बच्चों की करने का जो वो मांगते हैं, पहले रह जाते थे, अभी मैं उनको सब ला के देती हूँ।
The journey is not without obstacles. Educational gaps, limited skills training, and deeply rooted gender norms continue to restrict autonomy. In many households, male members still dominate decision-making. Ownership of income is not always guaranteed. Balancing family responsibilities with personal aspiration remains a daily negotiation. And yet, change has begun.
यहाँ काम करने के बाद अपने बच्चों का गुजर बसर भी अच्छे से चलता है और घर का गुजारा भी अच्छे से होता है और हमारी जो चॉइस होती है हम उसे पूरा कर लेते हैं।
हम शुरू काम करने लगे थे यहाँ, तो हमारे हालात ऐसे ही थे, तो हम अपने करते रहे, बच्चे भी पाले, अपने पढ़ाए भी, शादी भी करी है, घर भी बनाया है। तो आगे से आगे थोड़ा बढ़ते जा रहे हैं आगे। ये तो नहीं है जैसे पहले आए थे वैसे पहले जैसे नहीं है अब। तो अच्छा लगता है अब, इसीलिए इसी में जुड़े हुए हैं, इसी में से चले जाएंगे अपना पूरा करके।
बहुत हालात ख़राब थे जब यहाँ पे आए हम, और यहाँ काम करते हुए कई साल हो गए। जैसे जैसे हमारी सैलरी भी बढ़िया तरीके से मिलने लगी और बढ़िया मेरे परिवार में बहुत बढ़िया सुधार आया जी।
मेरी ज़िंदगी में तो बहुत बदलाव आ चुके हैं क्योंकि मैं यहाँ से सैलरी उठाती हूँ, मेरे बच्चों का देखभाल पालन बहुत बढ़िया करती हूँ।
मैंने कभी कहीं जॉब नहीं करी है, मेरा फर्स्ट टाइम जॉब है यहाँ पर। सारी बहनों के साथ काम करके मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है। 8 घंटे मेरे बहुत अच्छे कटते हैं।
मेरे पास कुछ पैसे भी रहते हैं, बचत भी रहती है और जो चाहता हूँ अपने घर में सामान भी ले आती हूँ, किसी से पैसे मांगने की जरूरत नहीं रहती।
Empowerment is not only about economic mobility. It is about rewriting narratives. It is about replacing dependency with dignity. It is about transforming silence into voice. It is about creating environments where women are not just workers, but decision makers, role models, and change makers. When women are given inclusive opportunities, entire generations benefit. Children stay in school longer. Households become more financially secure. Health outcomes improve and social attitudes evolve. The transformation is not abstract. It is visible. It is lived. It is powerful. Employment is not merely a source of income. It is a pathway to dignity, resilience, and lasting social change. When women rise, communities rise with them. And when opportunity meets courage, transformation becomes inevitable.
ऐसा बुढ़ापा आया रे, दगा दे गई जवानी। ऐसा बुढ़ा आया रे, दगा दे गई जवानी। होली खेल रहे घनश्याम गोकुल के कुंज गली में। थैंक यू मैडम।
हमारी तरफ से देश की सभी महिलाओं को महिला दिवस की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं।
Thank you so much for cheering them on. With that, we come to the close of the inaugural session. On behalf of OP Jindal Global University, I extend our sincere gratitude to Her Excellency, Ms. Mahishini Colonne, for her distinguished presence. Gratitude to Ms. Bhumi Satish Pednekkar for her warm inaugural address, and all our esteemed speakers, distinguished guests for their presence and participation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.